Right. Well, I'm excited to have Mike Callicrate visit with us about a new food system and how important it is to the people of the United States. Every time I've watched one of Mike's uh, presentations, I learned something, and I also actually have tried to implement some of the stuff he's talked about. And so I am really excited, Mike, to hear what you got to say this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on. So I've been in the livestock business now for about a little over 45 years, out of St. Francis, Kansas, where I have a cattle operation. We also have a diversified operation now with cattle, hogs, and we do some laying chickens to produce eggs for our store, Ranch Foods Direct, here in Colorado Springs. And so my history is been one of conflict with big meat packers. I discovered in about 1990, really, that the big meat packers were gaining way too much power over the independent producer, and we'd become price takers and we're really had lost our competitive marketplace in which we had easy access to be able to sell our livestock. So we went from being able to sell to as many as 20 meat packers in 1978 at my feedlot in St. Francis, Kansas, to basically selling none. Had no access to the market by 1998. December of 1998, I was informed by the only buyer that I had, National Beef, that they would no longer be buying my cattle. And here I was with a 12,000 head feedlot with 14,000 cattle in it because I couldn't sell them and had to come up with some solutions. And so basically the Secretary of Agriculture forced ConAgra at the time, now it's JBS, out of Greeley, Colorado, to buy all of my cattle, and I closed my feedlot. So we can litigate, we can legislate, hasn't done us any good, but what if we build this alternative food system, a more direct path to the consumer? It's got resilience, sustainability, and where you don't have to get up every day to look at the futures market to see how you're supposed to feel. What if we could make agriculture enjoyable for family farmers? What impact would that have on environment, on communities, on animals, on workers, and all of that? And so what I really focus on today is still fighting what's bad, but at the same time building the alternative, better food system. And so I got a call just this last week, and it was from a young lady, and she says, I want to farm and raise livestock. Where do I begin? And I said, you begin with the end in mind. And who was that? Who was that said one of the seven principles, business principles, begin with the end in mind. And so this is also very true for rebuilding this local regional food system that we've discussed. And so look at the wreck that we've had. Look, we've just had a complete expose of the failures of this industrial model, the industrial food system, which is highly concentrated. It's highly preferential. Only the chosen few players, big feedlots, for example, get to play. The big meat packers are aligned and partnered with the biggest retailers. If you're starting out today and you want to get into the livestock business, perhaps the meat business even, you just can't get market access. It's just not there. And I know this message sounds really negative, but it's the reality. And I don't want this young lady that called me to lose all of her grandmother's inheritance and family and friends' money in her enterprise just because she's excited about COVID exposing the flaws and covering up these small locker plants with more animals than they can possibly kill because of the failure of the global supply chain system. And so Ranch Foods Direct on March 13th, 2020, when the big panic hit, was full meat counters. We never ran out. All we did was crank up our slaughter and increase our throughput because we had room to do it. Where the big meat plants, they run at 100% all the time. The efficiency that they talk about is throughput efficiency. And it's not in the interests of Americans and people who eat, and particularly people who raise livestock, being able to get hanging hook space in these slaughterhouses. So on the right, you've got your King Supers at Fillmore and Centennial, just west of the Ranch Foods Direct store in Colorado Springs, shelves empty for a very long time. So what's the problem here? Let's first discuss the problem, and then we'll talk about the solution that as I see it. So today, a handful of multinational monopoly corporations control our food and agriculture system. Their abusive practices jeopardize the economic viability of independent farmers, ranchers, and small businesses, lock farmers into unfair contracts, and suppress workers' wages. Using their economic power and political influence, these same bad actors trap farmers on a never-ending treadmill of intensifying their industrial agriculture practices to squeeze an additional bushel of grain out of their already exhausted soil, only to sell it into an already saturated market. The results are lower prices, a never-ending need for government subsidies, and continued degradation of the environment, leading to greater weather extremes. Farmers have no apparent way out. And that is a true statement. Comes to us from the Family Farm Action Alliance, part of the Family Farm Action Group out of Missouri. It's not just producers that are being hammered and being and are living their lives in high risk at this time of COVID. 10,000 cars waited hours in line for emergency food aid in San Antonio last week. This was April 17th, 2020. This continues until today. And now even the food pantries in our cities are running out of food. What are we going to do? We can't build this new alternative pathway to the consumer fast enough. More people may die from hunger than the coronavirus this year, says aid group Oxfam. Chronic hunger is a direct result of poverty, and poverty is the result of concentrated power and wealth. Andrew Fisher, who wrote the book Big Hunger. So we have market predators and we have pretenders. So as we build our new food system, we can talk about a lot of things like natural, family farm raised, humanely raised, and now the new cool word is regenerative. And the big meat packers and the big food companies are very, very quick to adopt and co-opt these terms and steal the benefit of that advertising and marketing to be able to reach consumers with a completely fraudulent message, deceptive and misleading messaging. And so Cargill now is advancing regenerative agricultural practices, since that's the new word. And it's a great process that we've been involved in for probably around 10 years, rebuilding the soils, increasing density of livestock, intensive grazing. All of that is what we've implemented across the country. Many of us more cutting edge and leading innovative producers have been doing it. And now the big meat packers want to own it. And so the Federal Trade Commission, who was supposed to stop this fraudulent, misleading, deceptive marketing, has done absolutely nothing to stop it, nor has the Justice Department done anything about the monopoly power of these big corporations. And so for the last 40 years, industrial agriculture has put corporate profits over people, animals, and the environment, leaving producers and workers with a pittance of the food dollar and people hungry. Today, the producer of a 1,400-pound average steer and heifer that's slaughtered at a big plant in the United States under USDA inspection is bringing $3,700 based on USDA's average beef retail price across the big box scanners, $3,700. So basically, you're getting 41% of the consumer beef dollar. And that is compared to 1970, just before I got into the cattle business, where we were receiving from 68 to 70% of the consumer beef dollar. Today, that's $1,000 a head that the producer of a 1,400-pound animal has lost of his share of the consumer beef dollar. And that is a result of this monopoly power and abusive power of the big meat packers. So regenerative agriculture is beginning to heal the damage. It's very exciting that we can manage in ways that reduce costs and restore soil health. Many appealing words and phrases like natural, organic, and have been stolen. and regenerative is next. Private brands become zombies. Nobody is making it. Epic started with, and they were going to really benefit the Native Americans with their new bison bar. And they no sooner got in business and they sold out to General Mills, and then put Tonka out of business. Well, Tonka came back and no sooner got back on their feet and they sold out to Purdue. So the popular labels from Coleman to Nyman to Laura's Lean to all of those labels that I saw when I first started thinking about getting in this business are now gone and under the umbrella of big companies. And that is true throughout our food system, even in the processed food sector. And so how do we become more food secure and reduce and decentralize abusive market power? Ensure farmers, ranchers, and workers earn living incomes, rebuild rural economies, produce healthier and safer food, and how do we build a food system that's more resilient? The solution is we fight what's bad while building something better. Yesterday, Barry Lynn and Zephyr Teachout had a webinar talking about these middle two books, Break Them Up and Liberty from All Masters. And really, this is a liberty issue. It's a freedom issue. If you cannot have a fair, open, and competitive market, you cannot be free. You cannot have the freedom to access a fair marketplace. And so you're open to the possibility of selling your animals for a chronically below cost of production price. And so we have a very difficult time getting new entrants into the business, and we continue to lose massive numbers of producers. We've lost over 40% of our cattle producers. We've lost over 84,000 of our independent farmer feeder, smaller feed yards across the country that used to bid on those Montana calves every fall. Those people have now disappeared, and those animals that they were feeding have been added to the big meat packers, captive supply feedlot inventory and the expansion of those bigger industrial type feedlots. And so we've got to break up the monopoly. We have to work very hard at that. And with this new Biden administration, we've got to put pressure on the Justice Department, on agriculture. Tom Vilsack's going to have to make a 180. He's going to have to start fighting for family farmers instead of standing up for corporate America. President Lincoln envisioned our nation as self-sufficient and sovereign. You know, he started the land-grant college program in our country. And in the same year, we started the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. He had an advisor by the name of Henry C. Carey. Henry Carey said, the nearer the consumer to the producer, the more instant and the more regular become the exchanges of service. And he talked about, if we would promote the growth of freedom, we must adopt the measures needed for bringing together the producers and consumers of food and wool, and thus augmenting their power to have commerce among themselves. This is the model that I envision that we apply across the country. When we broke up the big meat packers back in 1921, and prior to that, the 4 recommendations from the Federal Trade Commission, which is who we're looking to now to break up the power of the big meat packers, like they're planning to do with Google, Facebook, and Twitter. We also need to break up the monopoly power of the big packers. But the 4 recommendations, one of the 4 recommendations of the Federal Trade Commission back there in 1918 was that the government acquire such of the branch houses, cold storage plants, and warehouses as are necessary to provide facilities for the competitive marketing and storage of food products in the principal centers of distribution and consumption, the same to be operated by the government as public markets and storage places. That's what I want to talk about. In 1959, this Iowa land-grant college was officially renamed Iowa State University of Science and Technology. Animal husbandry, where people are on the land, where families are husbanding livestock, taking care of livestock, where kids get up early and go do the chores before they go to school, before they eat breakfast. That animal husbandry gave way to an industrialized definition of animal science. which put a pig in a 2x7 crate. It put 130,000 head of cattle in one feedlot at Yuma, Colorado. It put hens in battery cages. And this is really was a betrayal of the vision of President Lincoln. So when animal husbandry became animal science, corporate influence overcame our curriculums in our colleges, and particularly our land-grant colleges. And we were teaching our kids that it's got to be efficient, that agriculture is a business, it's not a vocation, it's not something you do for fun. You know, now you want your neighbor's land more than you want your neighbor. So everything changed, and that was probably 60 or so years ago. But to build a healthy, diverse, and decentralized food system that we need now, that feeds all of us, we must again teach animal husbandry, land stewardship, and animal processing skills. And the producer, the husbandman, the steward of the land must be the first partaker of the fruits, as St. Paul said. And I love the part about teaching animal processing skills, because the Montana Farmers Union is behind a project in Montana to teach northern Montana a curriculum on meat processing and cutting that will give us the labor that we don't so desperately need, the skilled labor to be able to process a carcass to a retail end product. And this is where basically you begin with the ranch, you begin with the feedlot, you begin with the production of that animal. But this is the key to being able to sell meat instead of livestock. So this is a mobile slaughter unit that this was the second one we built that was greatly improved over the first one. But this was located at Callicrate Cattle Company in St. Francis, Kansas, a kill box, a full corral system. And basically this gave us that connection to the consumer that we needed. Additionally, once those animals are processed, they've got to have somewhere to go. And right now, that somewhere is backed up a year and over a year in some cases before they can even process that carcass, let alone slaughter that animal. And so what we've done in Colorado Springs is we've built a food hub here that does include meat. Unlike most food hubs in the country, in fact, it may be the only food hub in the country that actually can process carcasses into final retail cuts. In addition to supplying the community with all of the fresh produce and other foods that are grown in the region. And this is what I want to see replicated across the country, so that young lady that wants to get in the farming and livestock business can actually have access to a market that works. So the Colorado Springs facility provides space for meat processing, value-added food production, and distribution of foods from the region. This is a place that a lot of people come and tour, and we hope gets replicated. Here is an example of a public market. And this is what I really want to see happen more around the country, but not just a public market, not just the Reading Terminal Market in Philadelphia, which is the heart and soul and energy center of the city of Philadelphia. But in addition to this public market, I want to add the processing piece. I want to be able to bring the carcasses in from the country, from the several mobile units or modular units or kill units that are around where the livestock are, transport those carcasses into these spaces and cut them up right in front of the public so they know it's real. No more box beef from the big meat packers. This is from the carcass to the plate with skilled workers earning good wages in these public markets across the country. They must be located in urban centers that are big enough to support this kind of production, like Philadelphia, like Colorado Springs, Denver. It can be size appropriate. It can be smaller communities, but it needs to be owned by the public, paid for by the public, and thereby you get a partner in the public that will support the purchase of these products. We must adopt the measures needed for bringing together the producers and consumers of food and wool, and thus augmenting their power to have commerce among themselves. Again, Henry C. Carey, advisor to President Lincoln. This is a mission statement that I composed. The centrally located, publicly owned market and food hub feeds the city. Foods from the region are processed, packaged, and sold, from meats to grains to produce. Locally owned businesses include a fresh meat market, a miller, a baker, creamery and cheesemaker, a brewery using local barley and hops, along with many prepared food makers sell directly to eaters and eateries in this affordable space. Seasonal markets outflow from the main market, welcoming producers and growers from urban to rural. This energy-filled year-round market is where the community happens, a gathering space for residents and destination for workers. So this is my vision of what I think we need across the country, and it doesn't take that many of them. What if the Montana Farmers Union hosted and sponsored this sort of a movement? What if the Farmers Union enterprises took this on and put this in cities around the country? Do with public markets somewhat with like they've done with the restaurants in DC. But let the public own this. They should put up the capital. They should provide the real estate. And the biggest barrier right now that I see in the failure of the one in Colorado Springs was due to the developers in our community, due to the rent collectors. And if you go around and you look at these cities that are expanding, you see them expanding with chains, Wall Street-based businesses. These are businesses that take money out of the community, leave behind below living wages, leave behind bankrupted small businesses. And I'm saying we've got to look at a different economic model that serves the community, that builds wealth in the region, pays people living wages, addresses the poverty problem and thereby the hunger problem. And I think this can be done from this public market concept. John Eichert has written a great piece that I'll add to this presentation. I can make available a link to his community food utilities proposal. And this is, I think, where if you can get city councils that will support this kind of infrastructure, we can solve many problems. The city councilors are a real barrier because typically they are controlled by the big developers and rent collectors, and that has to change. But one of the big threats of this kind of a gathering space is that they become political. That people, when they get together over a cup of coffee or over a beer or over a great deli sandwich, they talk about the community. They talk about how do we get better leadership? Who would make a good person on city council? Who's going to be our next mayor? And they know this is a serious threat from an informed citizenry. And these markets are going to be a place where citizens do become better informed and make better decisions about the leadership in their communities. So that's it. That's all I've got, Walter. Thank you.
Well, that's quite a bit, Mike, and I think those are awesome goals. You and I've talked about food security for some time, and you know, this cheap food policy that we started implementing here in the United States 60 years ago is all about corporate control of the food dollar. Not about providing quality food to Americans, not about providing cheap food even to Americans. It's about the corporate control of the food dollar. And you could tell by looking, I'm a young farmer, right? And when I first started farming and ranching, Montana produced and processed 70% of our own food. We had a flour mill in every major community in Montana. We had slaughter plants. We had home delivery milk. We don't have any of that now. And we need to get back to a regionalized local food economy. And this pandemic has put a magnifying glass on our food supply, and as you demonstrated in your pictures there, it's broken. And I really like the public food market concept, and putting and with a cooperative twist, so that the members of the co-op that are having stores, vendors there, are part of the co-op, and that the consumers who come in and purchase products from it are part of a co-op, and in that way becomes a community-owned facility, and that it is benefiting the community, and they have a control of their own destiny.
You know, Walter, the developers would say, well, let's build a new sports arena. The Broncos need a new home, or the Sky Sox in Colorado Springs need a stadium. That's because they make money off of that and the apartments they're building around those sort of facilities. But they don't, but what would benefit the public much more is a fraction of the dollars that it took to build a sports stadium could be put into an existing structure, perhaps within the city, to turn it into a public market, or even a new structure like the one in Milwaukee. Beautiful public market, 30-some thousand square feet, serving the community, in those tax dollars, giving people in the community a market for what they produce. But you got to know that the developers would rather have a new museum. They would rather have a sports stadium. They don't want consumers having alternatives to their rent payers, which are these Wall Street based fast food and chain type businesses. So,
you know, Mike, I don't know if you have heard rumors about it, but South Dakota's big arena burned down at their state fairgrounds, and the livestock barn. And so they're building a new facility there. And it's going to be huge, 90,000 square feet, and an event center. And it'll have 2 arenas, so you can have 2 rodeos going on at once. Wouldn't it be great if they just took a little portion of that building and fed the local people and allowed the farmers and ranchers in that area to be able to sell their goods?
Oh gosh, that'd be awesome. How about Denver? The National Western Center is basically, in my view, the National Western has been a showcase for industrial agriculture for many years. And now they've got the National Western Center that they're renovating and building all this new stuff. I mean, investing lots of money, but they won't accept this food hub / public market type model to go in there, because they want the high rent. It's going to be high rent space that they're making available. This is a publicly owned facility, yet it's so misdirected and misguided. And it was successful in killing the other public market food hub that was being planned for the old public service power plant location along the river that would have just been phenomenal for Denver. And apparently they've got it knocked back and in favor of the National Western Center, which does, again, like South Dakota, nothing for the ranching and farming community of the state.
I am, though, excited about the meat cooperative that we're trying to put together, utilizing your mobile harvest unit. You know, right now, as you pointed out, our USDA plants here in Montana, if you went to schedule a kill there, you're in 2022.
Right.
You can't schedule a livestock harvest in most of these USDA plants today. You can't schedule one this year, and it's. I think this is not going away. I think the consumers have taken notice. You know, when they saw empty shelves, they were like, "What's going on here? I thought the food started here," and so they're starting to pay a little bit of attention. And you can't buy local meat. Even our retail meat counters here in Montana are just processing boxed beef from JBS or National or one of these other big 4 packing plants. And this is going to give an opportunity. I've got a lot of members. Montana Farmers Union has a lot of members who are trying to do direct marketing. And this year they're struggling, not because they don't have a market, they're struggling because they don't have a place to harvest their livestock.
Right. Yeah, that is exactly the case around. But we have to be a little bit cautious that once the shelves are, which they have already filled back up at these big box stores, that the consumers will stay with us. We need them to stay with us, and so we've got to be professional. We've got to be able to package it and in a professional way. It's got to be attractive. They've got to know they're getting high quality. We've really got to step up and do the job right, so that we can keep those consumers supporting the family farm and ranch model.
I just want to remind everybody watching, if you have any questions, that you can put them in the chat box, question and answer box. Let us know, and we'll make sure to get those questions asked. Part of the consumer education is letting them know where their food comes from. And with that product of USA label misleading the consumers into thinking they're buying US beef, it's fraudulent.
Absolutely.
And then the fact that they eliminated cool country of origin labeling, the Congress repealed that on beef and pork only. I mean, you can look at where your shirt comes from, Mike, but you don't know where your beef and pork comes from.
And that was a result of JBS and Smithfield, now Chinese owned. They didn't want labeling. In fact, they bought that infrastructure in the United States as a conduit, particularly JBS, to be able to sell their stuff from South America into our country. So labeling is certainly contrary to their interest. But look at the kind of people that support and represent JBS. Chandler Keyes, former National Cattlemen's Beef Association lobbyist, now works for JBS. We had the revolving door from the Food Safety Inspection Service, Al Almanza. He let that rotten meat in out of Brazil. And when he was made to stop by Sonny Perdue, finally, after over 90 days, he quit and went to work for JBS. So we've got some real serious work to do here to get our government back to where it will be representing people instead of corporate interests.
So we have a hand that's been raised by Giles, if he would like to ask his question, and then we also have another question, a couple questions.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit more of a comment, but a question. To build up on what Walter was saying is that we used to have the market infrastructure on the local and regional level. And like you said, in Philadelphia, New York, Baltimore, every city had a centralized wholesale market. And we've lost that system to outfits like Cisco, right? And when we talk about a market or a food market, it's more than just a place of retail. There has to be a place of price discovery. What are tomatoes worth today? What are apricots worth today? One place in the world that hasn't lost that system is France. In the old days, almost all the food used to come to the center of Paris at place Les Halles, which means the halls. And that was a nighttime wholesale market. All of the restaurants and grocers and everybody came there, bought their food to take back to their establishments and resell. Essentially, they were, it's a system that would turn around the food within 24 hours. That's why in France, tomatoes taste like tomatoes, right? And well, the house got too big for Paris, so they moved it to the outskirts, but the new one called Rungis still functions that way. And from Rungis, buyers get food and redistribute all across France in local public supported marketplaces. There might be just one market day a week, and they come in with their trucks or trailers all set up, all refrigerated, open it up, a full store of cheese, a full store of meats, a full store of fruits, you know. And the food is sold to the consumer, you know, while it is still fresh. And there's a system of price discovery. And what you've been talking about, Mike, is that we don't completely need to reinvent the wheel. I think it'd be worthwhile to take some trips to France and see how they do things.
All right, we have two more questions if we'd like to take those. The first one is, how do we make consumers see the value in more local food, and it might be worth a little higher price than food from a big box store?
You know, we always talk about how we have to charge more. If you look at what consumers are spending today for beef, for example, this month or last month's, actually, it's the 27th today, so we've already got the USDA report on beef values. It's $6.29 a pound on average right now. That's based upon this month's USDA price. That's nearly $3,700 a head on a live animal. And that's the Walmart meat. This is the meat that's got 12% added solution. This is the grind that has pink slime added to it. This is the industrially produced, all the performance enhancing drugs they can think of used on these animals. This is not the best beef in the world that we're getting pricing from USDA on. But we could live with that if we could just get a bigger share of it. We don't necessarily need to charge more to consumers than what they're already paying. Now, there is some issues in the marketplace where you've got the food waste that's coming in at half price and knocking us out of these wholesale markets, like with Food Maven here in Colorado Springs and Denver. That's a horrible model of doing business. It's highly predatory and just knocks out the local producers entirely. But you know, the consumer just needs to understand that, and we need to continue to relate this messaging that this food is healthier, this food is better, this food builds community, this food tastes better. It's from people you can know. And the problem, I think, of a huge problem is what the Walton family, what Walmart has taught Americans for 50 years. And that is to be aggressive, price shopping consumers. And I am not sure that there's a cure for that disease. That is a deadly disease. And we've got to try to figure out what the cure is. And this question is really asking that question, is how do we get an aggressive price shopping consumer to support local and eat better? And oftentimes it's a health scare. Maybe it's a heart attack. Maybe it's diabetes. It may be, and maybe it's they never ever get it. But we have got such a fast growing younger population today that is searching for community. They're searching for a world that works for everyone, and I love it. And these are the people that it is absolutely our responsibility to help build this world that works. And so I don't know that we have to convince the aggressive price shopping consumer that has grown up in a Walmart store. It's this new generation that gets it that I think we work with. And I just love what Jill Stockton said about the French. These places of gathering around food are fantastic in so many ways, including price discovery. And if we can establish that a beef animal is worth $1.80 a pound at the local market in Billings, Montana, then why in the world wouldn't it be worth that as a finished animal going to any of the big packers in the country? Let them try to explain that. But you know what it actually is? It's about $2.50 a pound, live weight. So why are they able to buy them so at $1.07 to $1.09 today in the market? So these are the kinds of things we just have to be more aggressive in getting the word out. That mission statement that I had at the very last slide, that market, Jills, was the Queen Victoria market in Melbourne, Australia. And if you go into the meat section of that market, and this is a massive public market, if you go into the meat building, they've literally got rails, carcass rails, running down through those aisles in between those meat businesses. And they can direct those carcasses into the coolers within each one of those meat markets, whether they're value-added charcuterie, fresh meat, whatever it may be, from those carcasses that can be delivered from the local meat vendor, daily. But the problem is ConAgra and JBS in particular have taken over the Australian market and done to them what they did to us. And so now those markets are using boxed beef. There's very little carcass beef coming into those markets, even though they had the skill to cut it. The big meat packers at predatory price, they've done to Australia what they've done to the United States. So the other place that I visited recently is Buenos Aires, Argentina. They have that sort of price discovery place within the region, within the city, near the city, around the city, where animals are brought in from all over the country and sold to a lot of different small meat packers who bid on them. And so they don't have the loss in their share of the consumer dollar that we've got in the United States. And I was having dinner with a group of the Argentine ranchers and got into a conversation with them. And they said their biggest fear is that Argentina was going to become like the United States with a monopoly meatpacking sector stealing their livestock.
And I really think that it goes about, it's about developing our communities, as you pointed out, and it's more than just the price of food and the quality of food, but it's developing and rebuilding our local communities. I think is critically important. And I think there is one more question here. Lindsay, are we running out of time? Can we do this other question?
We have a couple more questions.
Oh.
One of the questions from Evan Johnston was, how do we get the beef checkoff to work more towards helping the producer on the legislative end to fight the packers rather than developing recipes?
Well, my view on the beef checkoff is that we get rid of it. As long as it's under the control of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, it's benefiting meat packers. The checkoff, the way it's structured right now, forces the producer to pay, and essentially we're paying for our own hanging, because those dollars that fund NCBA are essentially being turned into lobbying money that's getting policies in Washington, D.C. that's contrary to the independent producers' interests. So I'm saying kill it if we have to. But if we can't, we've got to at least take it away from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association's control.
We have two other questions if you'd like to take them. Okay, so this one is from Courtney Kibblewhite with Northern Egg Network. She asks if there are any examples of a food market working in a state like ours, where many communities are hundreds of miles from a major trading center. Any observations are direct marketing given those distance challenges?
Yeah, Courtney, you're talking about me. You're talking about Ranch Foods Direct. I produce my livestock in Kansas on the Kansas-Colorado border, and I transport what I produce there to Colorado Springs, which is 200 miles away. And you can go further, you can go shorter distances, but it is possible to do it. And when you take on a model like I've done, I'm not shipping live cattle, not one single mile. They are raised, they are fed, they are produced on the property and slaughtered there. So you eliminate that cost of trucking on that live animal. Still have to ship the carcass, but that's 63% of what the animal weighed. And there's just so many efficiencies, and my model is completely transparent, open to anyone taking a tour at any time. And I have built a model that works. But it's not just about me. It's not just about Callicrate Cattle Company. It's about how many other people can we help access the market? How many other people's cattle and hogs, whatever, that can we process and make retail ready with their labels on them? And how can we help them then distribute that product either through mail order or otherwise? So that's about half our total slaughter business and processing business here in Colorado Springs.
And our final question is, what suggestions do you have for making local food more accessible to families who are food insecure and rely on food banks and government benefits to meet their needs?
Well, this goes back to the public market concept. If you can address the poverty issue, you address the hunger issue. And today, food pantries don't have good food. Food pantries have the waste of the industrial system. And this goes back to the book that Andrew Fisher wrote called Big Hunger. And he calls it the food waste industry. And it's highly profitable. When big boxes give that food away, they get a tax deduction that essentially makes it a profitable enterprise. And so we've got to address some of those IRS issues. We've got to rebuild this system that can produce good food and make that available to people who are hungry. But the big thing that we're after, if we can keep money in the community, that, you know, on a broader scale, that's buy American. But if we can buy local, then we have less poverty and fewer people that are hungry. We don't have the 10,000 cars in line at the San Antonio Food Bank. This is what we have to address, and we have to do it very quickly. And the government has got to establish policies that stop this mess and this broken food system from getting any worse, and fund the model that does work.
I guess if we don't have any more questions, thanks, Mike. I'm going to make a shameless pitch right now for the Northern Montana Meat Cooperative and our meat curriculum. You know, as Mike pointed out, because of these huge multinational packers have created a chain system of harvesting our beef. They train their workers to work at one station, and they can do a really good job of cutting that piece of meat over and over and over again. But that same worker, if you ask them to butcher an animal and package it, they wouldn't even know where to start. And that's caused a big problem for recruiting help in our local meat slaughtering plants. And when I looked at starting this Northern Montana Meat Cooperative, I was struggling to find help. And so that's why I reached out to MSU Northern to see if they'd be interested in doing a meat processing curriculum. And they are. We're working towards doing that. We're trying to raise funds to be able to fund this meat processors curriculum. And they will be providing training to butchers, inspectors. If we're going to increase local processing, we're going to have more inspectors. And they are also going to teach business management classes, marketing classes, and regulatory management classes. It's going to be critical if we're going to have a local meat processing system again to train butchers. And then we're going to have a Northern Montana Meat Cooperative, which will be available to all the local producers in Montana to have their animals USDA slaughtered for sale. And they can be a part owner in this cooperative. They can control their own destiny. And it's an opportunity right now because they can't schedule kill space, but it's going to be an opportunity into the future so that they will be able to own their own processing facility in partner with their neighbors. So, you know, if you're interested in either one of these ventures, I put my cell phone number in there. Give me a call, 406-799-3782. We're looking for co-op members to join who are interested in controlling their own destiny as far as processing their livestock for sale. And we're looking for advisors and support of the meat processing curriculum at MSU Northern.
And Walter, I'm looking at providing internships for those students and hiring them when they graduate.
Awesome. So again, thank you, Mike. This was a great, as always, presentation. And again, I learned some more from you and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thanks, Walter. Thanks, everybody.
And I guess I'll hand it off to Justin. You can let us know